The transport ship emerged from faster-than-light travel, with the usual flash of distorted space. Inside, Arbiter Vel-Shan of the Thranosi people adjusted his ceremonial robes and reviewed the file one more time. Humanity. A species barely 80 years into galactic society, primitive by council standards, though they had somehow stumbled into functional FTL technology through what the report called aggressive experimentation and acceptable loss ratios. That phrase alone told Vel-Shan everything he needed to know about these creatures. The file showed their expansion pattern over the past 2 decades. 47 colony worlds, most of them in systems the Galactic Council had marked as protected zones 3,000 years ago. The humans claimed they never received notice of these restrictions. Perhaps that was true. Perhaps they simply did not care. Either way, the result was the same. They had built cities, farms, and industrial centers on worlds that belonged to the Council's historical expansion reserves. Vel-Shan had resolved hundreds of such disputes in his 2 centuries of service. The pattern was always identical. Newer species, excited by their first taste of the stars, pushed boundaries until the established powers pushed back. A show of force, a diplomatic ultimatum, and the newcomers retreated to acceptable borders. It maintained order. It prevented wars. It worked. His ship approached Earth's primary orbital station, a massive structure of metal and ceramic that looked functional rather than elegant. Council stations were works of art, flowing curves that demonstrated mastery over materials and gravity. This human construction looked like someone had simply bolted modules together until they ran out of space, then added more modules on top of those. Efficient, perhaps. Crude, certainly. The docking procedure was smooth enough. When Vel-Shan emerged into the reception area, he found a human delegation waiting. They stood in a neat line, wearing identical dark suits that seemed to be some form of formal dress. The one at the front stepped forward and bowed slightly. Arbiter Vel-Shan. Welcome to Unity Station. I am Ambassador Park Min-jun, representing the unified Earth government. The human's voice came through the translator clearly, and Vel-Shan noted that Park spoke slowly and carefully, as if dealing with someone who might not understand complex ideas. Ambassador Park, I thank you for receiving me on short notice. Vel-Shan gestured with his primary manipulators in the council sign of formal greeting. Park attempted to mirror the gesture. Got it slightly wrong, but the effort was noted. Shall we proceed to a private location? The matter I bring requires discreet discussion. Park led him to a conference room with a long table and simple chairs. No artistic displays, no cultural artifacts, just functional furniture and screens on the walls. 2 other humans accompanied them. Park introduced them as Admiral Sarah Chen and Minister Quan Ji-woo. They sat, and Vel-Shan activated his portable holo display. The Galactic Council has become aware of humanity's colonial expansion, he began, letting the display show a star map with Earth's colonies highlighted in red. These 14 systems, specifically, fall within zones designated as Council-protected space by the Treaty of Ancient Claims, established in the year 2947 by Galactic Standard Calendar. Park leaned forward, studying the map with interest. I see. Can you provide us with the documentation for these claims? Our records show these systems as unclaimed when our survey ships arrived. Vel-Shan had not expected questions. Usually, species became defensive or apologetic at this point. The documentation exists in the Council archives on Telvanni Prime. It has existed for 3,000 years. 3,000 years, Park repeated slowly. And in that time, were these systems occupied? Were there any structures, settlements, or resource extraction operations? That is not relevant to legal claim, Vel-Shan said, though the question unsettled him slightly. The treaty recognizes historical expansion rights for founding council members. I understand. Park made a note on a tablet device. Please continue. Vel-Shan displayed the next element of his presentation. Images of human colonies, with population figures. These 14 worlds currently house 67 million human civilians. The Council recognizes the logistical challenges of relocation. Therefore, you are granted 30 standard days to begin evacuation procedures. Full withdrawal must be completed within 1 standard year. The room was quiet for several seconds. Admiral Chen, the military officer, showed no expression. Minister Quan wrote something on his own tablet. Park simply nodded. And if we refuse? Park asked the question with the same calm tone he might use to discuss weather conditions. Then the Council will be forced to take corrective action. Velshan kept his voice gentle, almost regretful. The Council prefers peaceful resolution. Ambassador Park, but order must be maintained. 47 civilizations depend on the stability that clear boundaries provide. Corrective action, Park said. Could you define that term more precisely? Velshan had not needed to define it before. The threat was usually sufficient. Military force to remove unauthorized settlements and restore Council authority over the protected systems. I see. Park made another note. So to be absolutely clear, if we do not evacuate these colonies within the specified time frame, the Galactic Council will attack our settlements. Settlements that include cities, farms, schools, and homes for 67 million people, including children. The way Park said it made the policy sound somehow cruel, though it was simply standard enforcement procedure. The Council sincerely hopes that will not be necessary. Surely Earth can find suitable colony locations among the vast unclaimed systems in this region of space. Surely, Park agreed. He stood and extended his hand. Another human gesture that the cultural briefing had explained meant formal agreement or farewell. Thank you for traveling this distance to deliver the Council's message in person, Arbiter. That courtesy is appreciated. We will need some time to consult with our government and evaluate our options. Velshan stood as well, though he did not take the offered hand. Physical contact with unknown species carried risks. Of course, I will remain in orbit for 3 standard days if you require clarification on any points. Ventia grew 5. Ventia grew 5. That is generous. Park walked him back to the docking area, making pleasant conversation about the station's construction and Earth's recent advances in fusion technology. The humans seemed genuinely friendly, nothing like the aggressive primitives the report had suggested. As Velshan's ship departed, he composed his initial report to the Council. First contact with Earth leadership completed. Ultimatum delivered as specified. Ambassador Park appeared receptive and asked reasonable questions about the process. Compliance expected within acceptable time frame. These humans seem more civilized than their brief history suggests. Recommend standard monitoring during transition period. He felt satisfied with the mission. Another conflict resolved through proper diplomatic channels. The Council would be pleased. On Unity Station, Park returned to the conference room where Admiral Chen and Minister Quan waited. The recording of the meeting played on the wall screen. They watched it once in silence. Then Park paused it on the image of the 14 colony worlds highlighted in red. 67 million people, Chen said quietly. He called it corrective action, Quan added. Park sat down heavily. His friendly expression was gone, replaced by something tired and old. He threatened to kill our children to enforce a treaty we never signed, claiming systems they never occupied, because we did not know about rules they never told us. Chen pulled up another display, this one showing Earth's actual military assets. Ships in construction, ships in active service, weapons systems in development. Can we evacuate that many people in 30 days? Theoretically, yes, Quan said. Practically, we would lose everything we built, every resource invested in those worlds, and we would be at their mercy forever, retreating whenever they decided we took something they wanted. The 3 of them sat in silence for a long moment. How much time do we actually have? Chen asked. Park looked at the calendar. 30 days until they expect us to start. Probably another 15 days of negotiation before they lose patience. Maybe 10 more days before they actually commit to military action. 55 days total. Maybe 60, if we are very lucky. Enough? Quan asked. Chen pulled up another screen. One showing classified projects that officially did not exist. Stealth ships, AI-guided weapons systems, long-range kinetic bombardment platforms. Unquote. Technologies developed in secret because Earth had never agreed to the Council's weapons treaties. It will have to be, she said. The emergency session of Earth's Defense Council began 18 hours after Arbiter Velshan departed. Representatives from every major nation sat in the underground command center in Geneva, watching the recorded ultimatum for the third time. When it ended, nobody spoke immediately. Defense Minister Quan Ji-woo stood and walked to the display showing the 14 colonies. "I have family on New Seoul," he said quietly. "My sister, her husband, their 3 children. They have been there for 8 years, built a home, started a farm. The children were born there." He touched the screen, where New Seoul glowed in red. "The council wants me to tell my sister she has to abandon everything because of a treaty signed 3,000 years ago for systems they never even visited." 67 million people, someone said from the back of the room. "We can move them. It would take every transport ship we have, cost us 2 years of economic output, and destroy our expansion momentum. But we could do it." Admiral Chen brought up another display. "And then what? We retreat to systems they approve? Wait for them to decide those are protected too? Spend the next century asking permission before we settle any new world?" She shook her head. "We become subjects of the Council. Forever." 5. "The alternative is war," Ambassador Park said. He had not slept since the meeting with Velshan. "War against 47 civilizations. Species that have been traveling the stars for thousands of years. We have been doing this for 80 years. The room fell quiet again. The weight of the decision pressed down on everyone present. Captain Lee Seo-yun, who had been listening from her position against the wall, finally spoke. "My grandmother fought in the reunification war. Korean forces against Chinese-backed insurgents. We were outnumbered, outgunned, fighting an enemy with better technology and more resources." She stepped forward. "Do you know what she told me? She said the side with better weapons usually wins, but the side that refuses to lose, that fights like survival, is the only option. That side can do things the other side never imagined. This is not a regional conflict, Captain," one of the European representatives said. "This is potentially the entire galaxy against us." "No," Chen corrected. "It is 47 species that have not fought a real war in living memory. They maintain order through threats and superior numbers. But when was the last time any of them actually had to fight?" She pulled up Council military records that human intelligence had compiled. Most of their combat experience comes from what they call peacekeeping operations, suppressing minor rebellions on colony worlds. Their ships are designed for intimidation and patrol, not warfare. Quan pulled up Earth's history files. Images appeared on the screen. The resource wars, the biological plague of 2089, the Pacific sovereignty conflict, mushroom clouds, burning cities, mass graves. We nearly destroyed ourselves 6 times in the past 2 centuries. Every major nation in this room has institutional memory of total war. War where civilians died by the millions. War where we used weapons that scared us. War that had no rules except survival. The images continued. Footage of human soldiers fighting in radioactive ruins. Ships burning in orbit during the Mars independence conflict. The scarred face of Earth herself, still showing the marks of weapons that should never have been used. "They think we are primitive," Park said, "and they are right. We are primitive. We still remember how to fight wars that end civilizations. They forgot." He looked around the room. "The question is whether we want to teach them to remember." Chen activated another display. This one showed Earth's secret military projects. Operation Nightfall has been in development for 12 years. We started it after our first contact with the Council, when we realized how many species were out there and how little they thought of us. The screen showed stealth ships, designed using principles that violated Council weapons treaties. They banned AI-guided warfare because they decided it was too dangerous. They banned kinetic weapons above certain speeds because they could not defend against them. They banned a lot of things, and we never signed those treaties. The stealth ships looked deadly even in static images. Long, dark shapes, covered in materials that absorbed sensor beams. No running lights, minimal heat signature, designed to be invisible until they wanted to be seen. How many? Someone asked. 240 combat-capable stealth vessels, another 100 in final construction phases, plus conventional fleet assets. But those will not matter much against Council numbers. 200 ships against thousands, the European representative said. The numbers do not work. They do if we do not fight the war they expect, Chen replied. She changed the display to show Council infrastructure. The Council maintains order through a hub system, communication relays, trade stations, antimatter production facilities. They built an empire on the assumption that nobody would ever attack civilian infrastructure. They have rules about warfare, treaties about acceptable targets, and we never agreed to those rules, Park said quietly. The implications hung in the air. Someone finally said what everyone was thinking. You are talking about total war. Not military targets. Everything. Chen nodded slowly. The Council has decided that our 67 million civilians are acceptable losses to enforce their territorial claims. I am suggesting we show them what it means when someone decides your civilians are acceptable losses too. Li spoke again. During the reunification war, my grandmother's unit was trapped in Seoul. Cut off. No supplies. Facing enemy forces that had them surrounded. The enemy commander sent a message. Surrender, or be destroyed. Promised to spare their lives if they gave up. She paused. My grandmother sent a message back. She said, if you want Seoul, come take it. But understand that if you make us fight, we will not fight to win. We will fight to make sure you lose too. We will make it so expensive that even if you win, you will wish you had never started. Did they attack? Quan asked. No. The enemy commander decided Seoul was not worth the cost. They pulled back and negotiated a treaty. Li looked at the star map, showing Council space. But my grandmother prepared for the attack anyway. She placed explosives in every major building, poisoned the water supply with slow-acting agents, made sure that if they killed her people, they would get a city that would kill them right back for years afterward. She met Chen's eyes. She was ready to do whatever survival required, and that willingness, that commitment, was what actually saved them. Park pulled up the evacuation projections. We can begin visible evacuation procedures. Show the Council we are complying. But we make sure our people on those worlds are protected. Underground shelters, hardened against orbital bombardment. We buy time, while we move our military assets into position, Chen continued. Stealth ships around every critical Council facility. Not their homeworlds. We are not trying to commit genocide, but every relay station, every major trade hub, every facility that keeps their civilization running smoothly. Quan brought up Council species reproduction data, something human intelligence had gathered over decades. Most Council species do not reproduce like we do. The Threnosi use cloning facilities. The Drashani have centralized hatcheries. The Velkons grow their young in orbital stations. If we threaten those facilities, we threaten their ability to continue as species. The room was completely silent now. Everyone understood what was being proposed. This is a line we cannot uncross, Park said. Once we start this, once we make civilian infrastructure and reproduction facilities valid military targets, we become something the galaxy will fear forever. They already decided our children are valid targets, Chen said simply. They just used polite words. Corrective action. Enforcement procedure. But the meaning is the same. They will kill our people to make a point. The vote was not unanimous. 7 nations abstained, not willing to commit to the proposed strategy. But 31 voted yes. Enough to authorize Operation Nightfall. As the meeting ended, Park walked to the window, looking out over the Geneva skyline. Quan joined him. "Do you think we can win?" Quan asked. "Win?" Park shook his head. "This is not about winning. This is about making sure they understand that threatening humanity does not start a negotiation. It starts a countdown to mutual destruction. And we are willing to push that button if we have to." Somewhere in orbit, Captain Lee returned to her ship, the Silent Promise. Her crew was waiting, already preparing for deployment. They had trained for this. Hoped they would never need to do it. But they were ready. The countdown began. 30 days until the Council expected compliance. And in that time, humanity would show the galaxy what happens when you threaten a species that never forgot how to fight for survival. The news broadcasts from New Sol showed exactly what the Galactic Council expected to see. Families packing belongings into cargo containers. Children crying as they said goodbye to friends. Long lines at the spaceport as the first wave of evacuees boarded transport ships. The footage was real. The families were genuine. But it was not the whole truth. Ambassador Park appeared on galactic news channels, his expression troubled and tired. "The unified Earth government is complying with the Council's directive. We are beginning evacuation procedures on all 14 contested colonies. However, we formally request an extension of the deadline. 30 days is simply not enough time to safely relocate 67 million people." The request went through proper channels. Arbiter Velshan, still in Council space, received it and presented it to the full assembly. The Council deliberated for 6 hours before reaching a decision. They granted a 15-day extension, pleased with themselves for showing mercy to these primitive humans who were finally learning their place in galactic society. Park received the news and appeared on camera again, looking relieved and grateful. "The Council's generosity is appreciated. These additional 15 days will allow us to ensure the safety of our people during this difficult transition." In the Council chambers on Telvanni Prime, representatives from 47 civilizations congratulated themselves on resolving the situation without violence. The Threnosi delegation proposed sending aid ships to help with the evacuation, a gesture of goodwill. The proposal passed unanimously. None of them noticed that while civilian transports moved people off the colonies, other ships were moving in. Ships painted to look like cargo haulers. Ships that matched the profiles of mining vessels and construction platforms. Ships that carried no identification codes in Council databases because they officially did not exist. Captain Lee Seoyeon stood on the bridge of the Silent Promise, watching her tactical display. 5 other stealth frigates floated in formation around her ship, holding position in the outer reaches of the Velkan system. They had been here for 8 days, completely invisible to Council sensors. The relay station hung in space 3 million kilometers away, a massive structure that routed communications for a third of Council space. "Status check," Lee said quietly. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Kim Jae-sung, ran through the checklist. All systems nominal. Power at 15% to minimize heat signature. Weapons armed, but cold. We are reading 0 active scans in our direction. As far as they know, we do not exist. Lee nodded. The waiting was the hard part. Her crew had trained for this mission for 3 years, running simulations and exercises until they could execute the attack plan in their sleep. But simulations did not carry the weight of what they were about to do. "Captain," her communications officer said. "Receiving coded transmission from Unity Station." Lee walked over to review the message. It was brief and encrypted. Status update on the larger operation. 47 stealth teams were now in position around Council infrastructure across 200 light-years of space. Every critical relay station, every major trade hub, every antimatter production facility, Human ships surrounded them all, waiting for a signal that might never come. Might never come. Lee held on to that hope. Maybe Park would negotiate an actual solution. Maybe the Council would accept some compromise. Maybe this would all turn out to be an expensive waste of time and resources. But she knew better. She had read the intelligence reports. The Council saw humanity as children, playing with dangerous toys. They would not negotiate as equals. They would demonstrate their power, make an example, and expect humanity to submit. That was how they had maintained order for thousands of years. Meanwhile, on the Drashani research station orbiting Kelvin 7, Dr. Emma Torres walked through the corridors like she belonged there. Her biosculpted features matched the Drashani profile closely enough. Her forged credentials identified her as a research assistant transferred from a sister facility. She had been here for 12 days, and nobody had questioned her presence once. The Drashani were not suspicious by nature. They had not needed to be suspicious for centuries. Council space was safe, ordered, predictable. The idea that an enemy agent might infiltrate their facilities simply did not occur to them. Emma reached the Network Operations Center and entered using her stolen access codes. 2 Drashani technicians worked at their stations, monitoring data flows. They nodded politely as she sat down at an empty terminal. Her fingers moved across the interface, pulling up systems that a research assistant should not need. But the Drashani security protocols were designed to prevent accidents, not actual malicious intrusion. Within 15 minutes, Emma had installed a backdoor into the communications network. Every message the Council sent, every order, every status report, would now be copied to a human intelligence server hidden in deep space. She closed the terminal and stood, offering the traditional Drashani gesture of farewell to the technicians. They returned it absently, focused on their work. Emma walked out, took a transport to the station's visitor docking area, and departed on a scheduled shuttle. Her mission was complete. Across Council space, 42 more human operatives were doing exactly the same thing. Some looked like Thrinosi. Others had been modified to pass as Velkans or Korveshi. They moved through Council society like ghosts, planting code, stealing data, mapping infrastructure, preparing the battlefield. On Telvanni Prime, the Council received regular updates from their observers watching the human colonies. The evacuation was proceeding. Slowly, yes. With much complaining and requesting of extensions, true. But it was happening. The humans were learning to follow Council law. Arbiter Velshan reviewed the latest reports and felt satisfied. He had been right about Ambassador Park. The human was reasonable, willing to see logic, even when it meant accepting a difficult situation. Perhaps when this was over, when humanity was properly integrated into Council society, Park would make an excellent liaison, someone who understood both human and Council perspectives. He composed a personal message to Park, expressing appreciation for Earth's cooperation and offering to discuss future diplomatic relations. The message was genuine. Velshan believed in building bridges between species. Park received the message in his office on Unity Station and read it twice. Then he deleted it and pulled up the tactical display showing Operation Nightfall's current status. Every piece was in position. The trap was set, but the Council had not triggered it yet. They were still watching, still waiting to see if humanity would fully comply. Park had bought time with his performance as the overwhelmed diplomat, begging for extensions and showing the galaxy a species that knew when it was beaten. Now came the dangerous part. The Council's patience would not last forever. Soon, they would want proof that humanity was actually leaving the contested systems. They would send inspection teams or monitoring ships, and when those teams reported that only a small fraction of the human population had actually evacuated, when they discovered that the underground shelters now housed millions of people instead of empty colonies, the Council would act. Park pulled up the status of New Sol, the colony where his strategy would either work or fail catastrophically. The public evacuation had moved 2 million people off-world, but 43 million remained, hidden in shelters that had been secretly constructed over the past month. Shelters designed to withstand orbital bombardment. Shelters filled with supplies, power generators, and life support systems that could keep people alive for years if necessary. The Council did not know about the shelters. They thought they were looking at surface cities, easy targets for demonstration strikes. When they eventually attacked, they would expect to see cities burning, populations fleeing in panic, immediate surrender. Instead, they would find that their weapons killed buildings but not people. And then, they would learn what happened when you threatened humanity and failed. On day 43, the Council's patience finally broke. Their monitoring ships reported that the evacuation rate had slowed to almost nothing. Ambassador Park's latest request for another extension was denied. Instead, the Council voted to send an enforcement fleet to one of the colonies as a demonstration. They chose New Sol. Population 6.3 million, according to their intelligence. Large enough to make an impressive statement. Small enough that its loss would not technically constitute genocide. A fleet of 30 warships departed from 3 different Council worlds, converging on the New Sol system. They were not stealth ships. They did not try to hide. The Council wanted humanity to see them coming, to understand that resistance was futile, to make the logical choice and surrender. Admiral Chen watched the Council fleet's approach on her tactical display. 30 ships, 3 times the size of anything in Earth's conventional fleet, armed with weapons that had been perfected over thousands of years, crewed by professionals who had never lost a battle, because they had never fought anyone capable of fighting back. She looked at the countdown timer. 2 hours until the Council fleet entered firing range of New Sol. 2 hours until they broadcast their final warning. 2 hours before the demonstration strike that would kill millions of humans and prove the Council's power. Minister Quan stood beside her, watching the same display. We have 98.7% of New Sol's population in the shelters. The rest are volunteers manning surface defenses and communication stations. How many volunteers? Chen asked. 8,000. They know what they are doing. They know what happens when the Council attacks. Quan's voice was steady, but Chen could hear the weight behind it. 8,000 people who chose to stay on the surface, to maintain the illusion of a populated city, to die if necessary, to make the strategy work. Park entered the command center, looking like he had aged 10 years in the past month. The Council fleet is broadcasting on all channels. They are giving us 2 hours to respond. Full evacuation, or they begin bombardment. Chen pulled up the master tactical display, the one that showed not just New Sol but every Council system where human forces waited in the dark. 240 stealth ships, 47 infrastructure targets. Thousands of lives about to change forever. Do we have everyone we can save? She asked. Quan checked the final numbers. Everyone who wanted to be saved. The volunteers knew the risks. Park looked at both of them, then at the countdown timer. This is the moment. Once I give the order, there is no taking it back. We will be at war with the entire Galactic Council, 47 civilizations. We will be the attackers, the aggressors, the species that broke every rule of civilized warfare. They threatened our children first, Chen said quietly. Park nodded slowly. Then he reached for the communication controls and opened a channel that would reach every human military asset in space. His voice was calm, steady, without hesitation. Krama. All forces, this is Ambassador Park. Execute Operation Nightfall. Full commitment, no warnings. Show them what it means to threaten humanity. The countdown to war reached 0. The Council fleet in the New Sol system detected nothing unusual until their ships started dying. The first warship, a Threnody heavy cruiser, simply broke apart. No warning, no alarm, just a tungsten rod moving at 40% of light speed, punching through shields that were designed to stop energy weapons. The kinetic impact released more energy than a nuclear weapon. The ship split in two pieces and tumbled through space, atmosphere venting, crew dead before they understood what happened. 3 seconds later, 4 more ships died the same way. Railguns, fired from stealth frigates that had been waiting in the dark for weeks, sent solid metal rods screaming through space faster than Council sensors could track. At those speeds, there was no defense. Shields meant nothing. Armor was paper. Ships died. Captain Lee Seo-yeon watched her tactical display as the Silent Promise and her sister ships executed the attack plan perfectly. Target 6 destroyed. Target 7 breaking formation. Target 8 attempting to raise shields. Fire. Another tungsten rod launched from her ship's railgun. The magnetic coils accelerated it down the length of the ship's spine in half a second, then released it into space. 5 seconds later, Target 8 ceased to exist as a functional warship. The Council fleet finally reacted. But they were reacting to an enemy they could not see. Their sensors showed impact vectors but no ships. They fired energy weapons into empty space, hoping to hit something. Instead, human fighters came out of nowhere, small craft moving so fast that Council targeting systems could not lock on. The fighters were piloted by humans who had trained in Earth's atmospheric combat schools. Schools that taught survival flying, where one mistake meant death. They wove through the Council formation, launching missiles that tracked heat signatures and detonated with focused nuclear pulses. Council ships, designed for intimidation and patrol, had never fought against enemies this aggressive, this willing to take risks that no sane pilot would take. Lieutenant Park G-1, flying a fighter designated Razor 7, screamed through the gap between two Council destroyers, her margin of error measured in meters. Her weapons officer locked missiles and fired. Both Council ships took direct hits to their engine sections. One exploded immediately. The other went into an uncontrolled spin. Weapons offline. Life support failing. Razor 7 to all fighters, they cannot track us. They are too slow. Break formation and attack freely. The Council fleet, which had arrived expecting to bombard a helpless colony, instead found themselves in a knife fight with an enemy that fought like demons. Ships designed for long-range bombardment could not respond to close-range combat. Crews that had never experienced actual warfare panicked and made mistakes. In 15 minutes, the 30-ship Council fleet was reduced to 8 damaged vessels fleeing the system at maximum speed. They did not get far. Human destroyers, which had been hiding in the outer system, moved to intercept. Not one Council ship escaped to report what happened, but New Sol was only one system. Across 200 light-years of Council space, humanity's answer came simultaneously. Captain Lee received confirmation that New Sol was secure, then gave her next order. All ships, proceed to primary target, weapons free, no survivors. The Silent Promise and her pack of stealth frigates moved toward the Velcon relay station. The massive structure hung in space, undefended, except for a handful of patrol ships. It had never needed real defenses. Who would attack a communication relay? Lee's ships approached to weapons range without being detected. Then they opened fire. Not with railguns this time, but with missiles designed to fragment into thousands of smaller warheads. The relay station's shields came up too late. The missiles impacted across the structure's surface, tearing through communication arrays, power generators, and the central processing cores. In 20 seconds, the relay that served a third of Council space went dark. 2 trillion beings suddenly lost the ability to communicate beyond their local systems. Lee watched the destruction and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No guilt. Just the cold knowledge that this was necessary. The Council had to learn that threatening humanity came with a price they could not afford to pay. The pattern repeated everywhere human forces had positioned themselves. At the trade hub on Corvin Prime, stealth ships appeared from nowhere and destroyed the station's defenses. Then they broadcast a message to the 7 million beings living on the station. Evacuate or die. They gave them 6 hours. Most evacuated. Some stayed, either brave or foolish. When the timer ended, human ships destroyed the station's main structure, turning the hub that had connected 40 systems into floating debris. On Drashani Prime's orbital space, human bombers executed a mission that would define humanity's reputation forever. The target was not military. It was the primary hatchery, where the Drashani species gestated 90% of their young. 3 million unborn Drashani in various stages of development. The bomber wing commander, Major Chen He-jin, led her squadron through withering defensive fire. She lost 2 ships before they reached the target. The survivors launched their weapons, missiles that penetrated deep into the hatchery before detonating. The hatchery broke apart in space. 3 million unborn Drashani died instantly. It was murder by any definition. It was also a message. You threatened our children, so yours are now valid targets too. Major Chen survived the mission and returned to her carrier. She did not celebrate. None of her pilots did. They had done what was necessary. That did not make it right. The same scenario played out at 37 other reproductive facilities across Council space. Cloning centers destroyed. Genetic repositories bombed into atoms. Nursery stations cracked open to vacuum. Humanity was systematically targeting the ability of Council species to reproduce. It was total war. War without limits. War that the Council had not seen in thousands of years. On Telvanni Prime, the Council convened an emergency session. But with communications disrupted, only 31 of 47 members could attend. They watched reports coming in from everywhere at once. Infrastructure destroyed. Fleets annihilated. Reproductive facilities gone. How? Someone demanded. How did they position this many ships without us detecting them? Arbiter Velshan stood in stunned silence, watching his civilization collapse in real time. He had delivered the ultimatum. He had told them humanity would comply. He had been so certain. Now he understood the truth. Humanity had never intended to comply. Every pleading message from Ambassador Park, every request for extension, every visible evacuation ship, had been a lie. A performance to buy time while they moved weapons into position. The humans had studied the Council, learned their systems, found their weaknesses, and when threatened, they had not chosen to negotiate. They had chosen to destroy everything the Council needed to function. We must mobilize the full military, the Velcon representative said. 4,000 warships, overwhelming force, crush Earth before they can do more damage. To what purpose? Velshan asked quietly. They are not fighting our military. They are killing our children. They are destroying our ability to exist as species. The room fell silent. The truth was unavoidable. Humanity had changed the rules. This was not a war for territory or resources. This was a war of extinction. The Council's military did mobilize. 4,000 warships, the combined might of 47 civilizations, moved toward human-controlled space. They expected to overwhelm Earth's few hundred ships through sheer numbers. Instead, they found that human ships refused to fight fleet battles. They hit supply lines. They destroyed support vessels. They targeted the civilian transports that carried food and medicine to Council worlds. When Council fleets arrived at human colonies, they found the cities empty and heavily defended. Orbital bombardment was useless against enemies underground. Ground invasions faced humans who fought with a ferocity that shocked Council soldiers. On the colony of New Vancouver, a Council ground force of 10,000 soldiers landed to take control of a human city. They expected civilians to flee or surrender. Instead, they found humans who had prepared for this. Humans who had placed weapons caches throughout the city. Humans who knew every building, every tunnel, every hiding place. The battle lasted 6 days. When it ended, 8,000 Council soldiers were dead or wounded. The human defenders, numbering barely 2,000, had lost half their people, but they still held the city. The Council commander, retreating to orbit with his broken force, sent a report that spread throughout Council space. They fight like every battle is their last. They take casualties that should break morale and keep fighting. They use tactics we banned centuries ago because they are too cruel. These are not soldiers. They are survivors who learned warfare in hell. Admiral Chen read that report and showed it to Minister Quan. They are starting to understand. Across Council space, the pattern became clear. Humanity was not trying to win through military superiority. They were making the war so costly, so brutal, so devastating that the Council would choose peace over continuing. Every day, more Council infrastructure fell. Every day, more reproductive facilities died. Every day, the Council lost the capacity to maintain their civilization. On day 43 of the war, the Threnosi government announced they could no longer reproduce without extensive genetic reconstruction. Their cloning facilities were destroyed. Their genetic libraries were corrupted. As a species, they faced extinction within 2 generations unless they surrendered and begged humanity for help. 4 other species faced similar situations. Their reproduction capabilities were simply gone. On day 51, the Velcon fleet, the largest and most powerful in Council space, withdrew from the war. They had lost 60% of their warships and gained nothing. Their government announced they would pursue separate peace negotiations with Earth. On day 63, the Council's military command admitted they could not win. They had lost 83% of their fleet. Humanity had lost fewer than 200 ships. The numbers made no sense until you understood that humanity was not fighting fleet battles. They were executing an extermination campaign against everything that made Council civilization function. On day 67, the Galactic Council voted unanimously to request unconditional surrender negotiations with Earth. Arbiter Velshan, representing what remained of the Council, sent a message to Ambassador Park requesting a meeting on neutral ground. Park suggested Unity Station. The Council, which no longer had the power to dictate terms, agreed. The war was over. Humanity had won. But the cost of that victory would change the galaxy forever. Unity Station looked different now. The corridors that had once seemed crude and functional now felt like the halls of a fortress. Council delegations walked through them with careful steps, speaking in quiet voices, avoiding the eyes of human security personnel who watched them with expressions that revealed nothing. Arbiter Velshan arrived with a delegation of 12, representing what remained of Council unity. They were escorted to the same conference room where Velshan had first delivered the ultimatum 67 days ago. The irony was not lost on him. Ambassador Park waited inside, looking exactly as tired as he had during their first meeting. But there was something different in his eyes now. Something hard and permanent. Admiral Chen and Minister Quan flanked him, along with representatives from Earth's major governments. Velshan sat down slowly. His people had prepared extensive notes, analysis of the war, proposals for peace terms. But looking at Park's face, he knew none of it mattered. "Thank you for coming," Park said with perfect politeness. "I understand you wish to discuss terms of surrender." "Surrender." Velshan said the word like it was unfamiliar. "The Council has never surrendered. Not in 3,000 years of recorded history." "Then this is a new experience for all of us," Park replied. His tone was not cruel, just factual. Velshan looked down at his notes, then back up at Park. "I need to understand something first. Before we discuss terms, I need to know why." He gestured at the datapad showing casualty reports. "We offered you a path to avoid this. Difficult? Yes. Expensive? Certainly. But possible. You could have relocated your colonies. Instead, you chose war. War that killed millions. War that has left 4 species unable to reproduce without your help. War that destroyed infrastructure. It will take us centuries to rebuild." His voice cracked slightly. "Why?" Park was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "You threatened to kill 67 million of our people as a demonstration. You expected us to negotiate which of our children to sacrifice. You thought we would calculate the cost and choose the cheaper option. He leaned forward. But we are human, Arbiter. We do not calculate which children to abandon. We eliminate the threat, instead. We would have negotiated, Velshan said. After the demonstration, after you understood we were serious, we would have found a compromise. Some colonies could have remained. The Council is not unreasonable. You were going to kill millions of people to prove you were serious about a treaty we never signed, Chen said quietly. And then negotiate how many more millions you might kill later if we did not obey. That is not compromise. That is hostage-taking. Velshan had no answer to that. The Council had done exactly what she described. They had simply never thought of it in those terms before. Minister Quan pulled up a display showing Council military doctrine. We studied your warfare protocols, your rules of engagement, your treaties limiting acceptable weapons and targets. Do you know what we learned? He did not wait for an answer. You built a civilization on the idea that war should be civilized, limited, controlled. You banned weapons that were too effective. You protected civilians because killing them was distasteful. You created rules to make war something you could win without really suffering. And you ignored all of those rules, Velshan said. We never agreed to them, Park replied. You assumed every species would fight by your standards. But we learned warfare in a different school. A school where survival was the only rule that mattered. Velshan looked at the humans across the table and finally understood. The Council had threatened a species that still remembered how to fight total wars. Wars where everything was a valid target. Wars that ended with one side destroyed. And they had been shocked when humanity fought exactly that kind of war in response. The Threnosi are dying, Velshan said quietly. Without our cloning facilities, without our genetic repositories, we cannot reproduce. In 2 generations, our species will cease to exist. I know, Park said. 4 other species face the same situation. You destroyed our ability to exist as a people. You threatened to kill our children to enforce a territorial claim. We made sure you understood the price of that threat. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Velshan asked, What do you want? What are your terms? That isn't Parter. What are your terms? Park slid a datapad across the table. The 14 contested colonies remain under human control. All Council claims to those systems are permanently revoked. Agreed, Velshan said immediately. They had lost the ability to contest that point. The Council will pay reparations for the attempted attack on New Sol. The amount is listed in the document. Was A.M. The Council. Velshan checked the figure and closed his eyes. It was devastating, but not impossible. Agreed. The Council will recognize humanity's right to settle any unclaimed system without requiring Council approval. Agreed. And finally, Park said, his voice steady, the Council will recognize Earth as the enforcement authority for existential conflicts. If any species threatens another with extinction-level warfare, Earth will respond with full military force. No negotiation, no warning, just response. Velshan looked up sharply. You want to be the galaxy's military power. The final word on what conflicts are acceptable. No, Chen said. We want to make sure no species ever threatens another the way you threatened us. We want to make sure that what we did to you never needs to happen again. And if we refuse this term? Velshan asked. Park's expression did not change. Then we continue the war, until the Council ceases to exist as a functional government. We have already demonstrated we can do this. The question is whether you want us to finish. Velshan understood. This was not negotiation. This was Earth, dictating terms to a defeated enemy. The Council could accept, or die. I will need to consult with the Council Assembly, he said. Of course, Park replied. You have 48 hours. The Council delegates left. In their private chambers, they argued for 6 hours before voting. The terms were accepted unanimously. There was no other choice. When Velshan returned to sign the formal treaty, he had one more question for Park. The hatcheries, the cloning facilities, the genetic repositories. You destroyed them, knowing it would doom entire species. How do you justify that? Park looked at him for a long moment before answering. I do not justify it, Arbiter. I accept it. We did what we had to do to survive. We targeted your children because you targeted ours. We made sure you understood that threatening humanity comes with a price so high that no rational species would ever pay it. He paused. Do I regret it? Every single day. Would I do it again if you threatened us again? Without hesitation. You made us into monsters in the eyes of the galaxy, Velshan said quietly. No. Park replied. We showed the galaxy what happens when you treat humanity like we are disposable. We showed them that we will do whatever it takes to protect our people. And now nobody will ever threaten us again, because they know what we are capable of. The treaty was signed. The war officially ended. The Council began the long process of rebuilding while accepting Earth's help to restore their reproductive capabilities. The price for that help was steep, but they paid it. 3 years later, the galaxy was quiet in a way it had never been before. Disputes that might have led to threats and military posturing now ended with negotiation. Species that might have tested boundaries instead stayed within them. Because everyone knew the new reality. If a conflict reached the point where extinction was threatened, Earth would respond. And Earth's response would not be measured, or limited, or civilized. It would be total, final, without mercy or hesitation. Commodore Lee Seo-yun, promoted after the war, now commanded an entire fleet division responsible for training new officers. She stood in a classroom full of young cadets, teaching them the lessons that had been written in blood across Council space. A cadet raised her hand. Commodore, do you regret what we did? The hatcheries, the genetic repositories. We killed civilians. We targeted children. That is war crime by any standard. Lee looked at the young woman and saw herself 3 years ago, before she had commanded ships in battle, before she had given orders that killed millions. Every day, she answered honestly. I regret every life we took, every facility we destroyed, every species we harmed. The cadet seemed surprised by the admission. Then why did we do it? Because the alternative was letting them kill our people. Because the Council needed to learn that threatening humanity does not start a negotiation. It starts a countdown to their own destruction. Lee pulled up an image of New Seoul, showing the shelters that had protected 43 million people. We did what we had to do so these people could live, so your families could live, so humanity could survive. But at what cost? Another cadet asked. At whatever cost survival required, Lee said firmly. And that is the lesson you need to understand before you take command of a ship. If someone threatens your crew, your ship, your people with extinction, you do not fight fair. You do not follow their rules. You fight to make sure the threat never exists again. You fight to win so completely that nobody ever threatens you again. She looked around the classroom. The galaxy is quiet now. Very quiet. Do you know why? Because every species out there knows what we did. They know that we targeted civilians. They know that we destroyed reproductive facilities. They know that we fought without rules or limits or mercy. And they know we would do it again if we had to. So they fear us, the first cadet said. Yes. Lee agreed. They fear us. And that fear keeps them from threatening us. That fear prevents wars. That fear saves lives on both sides. She paused. I wish we lived in a galaxy where fear was not necessary. But we do not. We live in a galaxy where the only thing preventing extinction is the knowledge that threatening humanity will end badly for everyone involved. The class ended. The cadets filed out, carrying the weight of what they had learned. Lee remained behind, looking out the window at Earth, spinning slowly below. Ambassador Park sat in his office at the same moment, looking at the same view. A glass of soju sat on his desk, untouched. He had a message waiting from Velshan, now serving as the Council's permanent liaison to Earth. The message was formal, polite, discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Park did not answer it immediately. Instead, he thought about the cost of peace. 67 million people saved. 31,000 human military personnel dead. Millions of Council civilians dead. 4 species unable to reproduce without Earth's help. Infrastructure destroyed. Trust broken. Fear established as the foundation of galactic order. He picked up the glass and looked at his reflection in the amber liquid. A man who saved his species by becoming what the galaxy feared most. A diplomat who negotiated through overwhelming violence. A leader who made decisions that would haunt him forever. His reflection showed the same tired face from 3 years ago, but the eyes were different now. Harder, older, carrying the weight of millions of deaths and the knowledge that he would order those deaths again if necessary. Park raised the glass in a silent toast to all those who died, on both sides, so that humanity could survive. Then he drank and got back to work. The galaxy was quiet now. Very quiet. And humanity stood watch, hoping they never had to prove the lesson again, knowing they absolutely would if they must, because that was what it meant to be human, to do whatever survival required, to protect their own at any cost, to make sure that threatening humanity was the last mistake any species ever made. The Council had sent a threat. Earth had answered, and nothing that threatened humanity would ever survive that answer again. The galaxy understood this now. And the silence that followed was the sound of peace built on fear, survival built on sacrifice, and a future where humanity would never have to choose which of their children to abandon, because they had shown the galaxy that they would burn it all down before making that choice. And the galaxy believed them.